Frank, on this chapter, Inviting the Breeze of Delight, chapter 15, this is the decisive moment.
Is that the way it's referred to in the book? Yeah, the decisive moment.
Yeah, well, the technique of right after, but well, I think it's a discussion on effort, on
Okay.
right effort, which you can define or we'll get to. But right effort in shamatha practice is to return from your involvement with thoughts and fantasies back to mindfulness of the body of breathing and the simple reality of being present. And so you ask a question here that I think is tremendous. If practice does not simply happen to you, do you make it happen? If so, how do you go about making it happen? These are important questions.
Yeah. So you want me to kind of
So it's like if
get started
if
right
practice does not happen to you, do you make it happen?
there? Yeah. The answer is yes and no. I think, or the answer is emphatically yes, and then more playfully yes. That's better. So actually, if I could talk about, there are kind of two stages to this
Right.
notion of the effort that is required to commit to meditation and to actually do it. The first stage is you have to get to the cushion and do it. And I think I talk in the chapter about how your attitude toward that, just toward getting to the cushion, is constantly defined by this sort of back and forth play of your longing to be a good meditator, your longing to actually do this, and your resistance to doing it, because it's challenging. It's challenging to do, and it's going to expose you in ways that you have not been exposed before. So there's a part of you that's going, I want this, and there's a part of you that's going, I don't want it. It's like, like this. And the first stage of right effort is dealing with that back and forth kind of ambivalence that we have about it. Because there'll be times when you're very inspired to go to the cushion and you just do it. There'll be other times when you don't want to. And when you don't want to, you have to push through your resistance and get to the cushion. And I think in this chapter, that's the whole discussion about laziness. Laziness,
Later, yeah.
laziness is that you convince yourself, you find ways of never going to the cushion. And for a while you tell yourself, well, I don't really need to meditate. I can get this without meditating.
Right.
Or whatever story you have about it. But ultimately, once you have come up with a story about why you can't meditate, or why you can't go to the cushion, or why today is not a good day to do it, you have given in to what the Tibetan masters have said for generations is the biggest obstacle to progressing on the path,
Right.
your laziness.
Right.
So the first stage is to cut through all the stories you have about why you can't do it, because you have to get to the cushion. If you don't get to the cushion, there's no path. You can talk to yourself all you want, you can read all the books you want, but if you don't go sit and face your experience directly, nothing's going to happen. Nothing will happen at all. Now, once you've gotten to the cushion, then the technique and the instruction have a way of taking care of you. And that's the only way I can really say it. If you don't go to the cushion, there's no way for that. It's almost like a quality of what my teacher called ordinary magic to happen. And the ordinary magic is that once you sit down and agree to face your experience and to practice touch and go, you begin to find that your stories over time, you don't have to make them end. They're going to end on their own. So the practice of sitting is to outlast your fixation on all the stories that you told yourself in the past were who you are.
Right.
It's a matter of outlasting them. And that will happen every time. And the longer you practice, the more often it happens and the sooner it happens. And that's just a fact.
I think this is, you're right. I mean, this is tremendous. You say Couldn't I just hang out with this fantasy a little longer?
Yeah.
At that point, you are already back.
You're already back. You've already exposed. You've already pulled the curtain back on the little man.
There's no warm up, no prelude. I mean, this is. I mean, this we're dealing with the mind. We're dealing with awareness. We're dealing with natural intelligence, sanity.
We are, and we're dealing, and we're dealing with this. It's actually very simple, but it's very profound. It kind of goes really deep.
Yeah, this one goes pretty deep.
It's basically saying your natural sanity and intelligence is not under your control. It's not under your control. The only thing that's under your control are all the stories that you keep fabricating to convince yourself that you are who you are in a certain way. Meditation will dismantle those. And it won't dismantle them from the outside like someone who has to take them apart. They will fall apart on their own. And that's what I call the decisive moment. The decisive moment is when the story falls apart. And even if you, as you just said before, even if you say to yourself, oh, can't I hang out with this a little longer? It's already gone. It's already gone. And so you're just, you know that you are kidding yourself. You know that you are just delaying the inevitable, even though the inevitable has already happened. You're already back.
I want to highlight. I want to keep highlighting this because I think this is so important.
It is important.
That it happens naturally and organically
And spontaneously.
I think this is so, part of the medicine here, part of, you've talked, in many different contexts that I've been with you about the Buddha being a doctor and taking the medication and that.
Taking the medication.
Yeah. And that is actually, and that the medication happens, to use your word, spontaneously, naturally, organically. There's nothing, you're creating a certain situation and adjusting your inner environment, if you will, slightly, adjusting your posture, adjusting your body, whatever, creating, maybe you need supportive, light and incense, but
yes,
that it.
You're creating a theater. The incense, the candles, particularly for a beginner.
Yes.
You need to create a stage set that reminds you of your intention to do this.
Right.
But the decisive moment is beyond your beautifully beyond your control. It is simply the natural wakefulness of your mind reappearing like the sun behind the clouds after your latest story, fantasy, memory, expectation, pleasurable, painful, fearful, or otherwise, has collapsed, which it will do. And this is when you begin to make the profound discovery that the thinking mind is full of holes.
Right.
It has no permanence, no solidity, and no absolute truth or meaning in it. And you're making it up. Whereas that moment of wakefulness, you cannot make it up. The Tibetan teachers use the word unfabricated, which is a beautiful word. They use that word all the way up to the experience of enlightenment. That the mind of the Buddha is an unfabricated mind. It cannot be controlled. It cannot be produced. It's unproduced, unfabricated.
You point out here how, to the extent that we give a label of any kind, I mean, you're talking about sometimes it's useful to label the experiences you're having conceptually as thinking.
Yes, yes.
This is very straightforward in the chapter itself. I'm not going to linger on it, but that there is a point in which the abstract watcher, the witness function, something starts noticing this phenomena.
That's good. Very good. Right. The witness. My teacher called it the abstract watcher. I don't know if anybody ever asked him why abstract, but my sense of that was it's abstract because if you look for it, it's not really there.
Right.
But it's a kind of it's as if you have set up you've set up something over on the side that is able to impartially observe the habitual patterns that you're almost always lost in. So when you set up the watcher becomes the way in which your practice of mindfulness can disentangle itself from all the stories that you have been so accustomed all your life to feel are real.
I want to go on a tangent here because I
It's
think
fine.
we're in the 21st century. This is meditation practice, mindfulness practice, whatever it's called generically in the public, has been connected with so many health benefits. And I want to make a tie-in here for this.
Please.
It seems to be the case that what you just named from the Buddhist and the traditional point of view, right? The traditional point of view, this is why there are health benefits. Because in order for this abstract watcher, for this witness function to understand this to happen, there has to be such a level of calm. There has to be an antidote to the speediness
That's
of our
great.
modern day materialism.
That's very good.
That the nervous system actually calms. There is less, I don't know, man, like antioxidants are produced. I'm not a
No,
neuroscientist,
right,
but
right.
it's
I do.
it
I
calms down
understand.
your gut. It calms
yeah.
down your nervous system. It's like, slow down. And if you slow down enough, there's medicinal qualities in the body.
There is. And also I would make a connection between there's no witness until you slow down. The witness doesn't exist until there's enough abandoning of that habitual neurotic speed. Where, as I said, the beginner's relationship to their stories and thoughts is like sitting under a waterfall. Well, when there are gaps in that velocity, momentum, that you're kind of drowning under your stories, the witness begins to appear. In fact, you could say that the nature of the witness is that whenever there are gaps in that environment of just being completely encased in your stories, a certain kind of intelligence, you could say a detached intelligence,
Right.
almost like a smiling observer.
You call it knowing later, but yeah.
Well, I call it knowing, but when I talk about knowing, I'm talking about all the stages of meditation. But this is the first stage of knowing, is that there is a witness. We can find the witness. The witness exists within ourselves as that which is able to see the stories without chasing them. So touch and go gradually strengthens the experience of witness.
Of witness.
That's the point.
So,
Yeah.
you say here, and I'm going to touch on this part because I highlighted it. Another way of framing, if you let me to reframe everything you just said right now in terms of the waterfall, is deflating the drama.
Deflating the drama.
Think, that sometimes, especially when you have been caught up in a particularly juicy and compelling fantasy, it is helpful in the moment you recognize your distraction to label it thinking silently. But notice that the label is an afterthought, whereas the moment of recognition that you were distracted happens before you think at all.
That's it.
So it's almost like, oh, you caught it. That was thinking.
Yes, indeed.
Boom, keep going now.
Right. And he uses my teacher again, Trungpa Rinpoche, Chögyam Trungpa, used the expression, don't entertain the messenger. And what he meant by that was, once you come back to the naked experience of being present in the body, in the present moment, in now, unencumbered and unfiltered by your stories, don't congratulate yourself. Don't congratulate yourself, because then you're just building another story. So the way he describes that is, a messenger comes and knocks on your door, and you open the door. That's the moment of coming back to nowness and leaving your stories behind. Don't invite the messenger in for dinner. Inviting the messenger in for dinner is then thinking about, my meditation is really going well now. And then you're just creating a story about you, the great meditator, which will fall apart very quickly.
Oh God, yes. It does happen.
And it happens, for sure.
It does happen.
For sure, because we're looking for ways, we're
looking
looking
for
for a new
more,
way to define ourselves.
That's right.
So now I'm the great new meditator. So we don't entertain the messenger.
Right.
Yeah.
So now I want to circle back to something very powerful that you laid out in the beginning. I think this is a phenomenal segue into the distinction between mindfulness and awareness that is really in the second chapter. In the chapter after this one.
Sure.
But now I want to circle back to the obstacle, the first part of the nature of effort here.
Okay.
We almost went into
right.
sort of a discussion about
that's good.
the second part of the effort that is, for lack of a better term, an exposition of confidence and effortlessness.
Exactly. And that's, I'm glad you brought the word in, because yes, the second part of the mindfulness of effort has an effortless quality if you respect it. And that is that the moment of waking up again is beyond you cannot fabricate it.
You cannot fabricate it.
It comes to you,
Yeah.
which is why we call it the breeze of delight. We haven't used the term yet, but
It's the name of the next chapter.
it's the name of this chapter.
It's the name of this chapter. Sorry.
The breeze of delight. We call it the breeze of delight
Yes.
because it comes to us rather than that we make it. That's so important to understand. And I can't emphasize enough the importance of understanding that meaning. In the beginning, I think for a beginner, maybe delight's too strong a word. I'd call it the breeze of relief. At first, there's a quality of relief when we realize that we're not condemned to endlessly regurgitate our habitual stories. And when we begin to have enough confidence that I can actually survive without these stories.
Well, there's something powerful here about framing, right? That people, just like the Buddha taught it, and the way the Vidyadhara taught it, but the way that certainly I've learned from you too, which is just go find out for yourself.
You have to find out.
Go find out for yourself. It's not.
You do.
There's nobody here like saying that, but that there is that the strengthening the witness function over time is capable of disassembling such strong emotions that there is delight in it. That there's
tremendous delight.
But it takes time.
But in the beginning, I think it's more like relief.
Right.
And I remember the first time that I sat a 30-day meditation intensive, 10 hours a day. It was just awful. It was just awful. And I got to see my mind in all of its horrendous, magnificent display. By the end of it, I was doing anything I could to keep telling stories. I exhausted all my other stories. So I would spend hours at a time just singing all the rock and roll songs that I could remember from my youth. And when I would finish them, I would try to find lists, things that I could just keep that mind churning, right?
Wow.
But it was exhausting, and it was so painful. And every time it would collapse, which eventually it had to, almost like a hamster on a wheel. That
Ran out of fuel.
That eventually
ran out of
so
glucose.
tired, right? Then he just falls off the wheel. Relief. So I'm talking my own experience. The collapse of the stories initially, for someone, a beginner, like that's how I experienced, so I'm talking from experience, is relief. But as time goes on and you begin to appreciate the profound significance of that moment when your stories fall apart, then it becomes delight. And the more delight, the more longing you have to practice.
To practice.
And the alternation between the resistance and the longing, as you go further and further, the longing becomes more powerful and the resistance becomes less powerful. That doesn't happen overnight. But relief becomes delight. I want to make that distinction because it was a real distinction for me. Yeah. And I think that for anyone who practices long enough, that distinction will resonate for you.
Yeah, I mean,
is that a distinction that you can understand too?
It's just, going off of my own
to delight.
My own experience. Now that you've pointed it out like that, it's certainly in the beginning when I did my solo retreats, how sometimes it was very difficult to, be sitting there for 8 hours,
Oh,
and but that it got easier. It, so the next day this is easier. This
and it gets
is
easier in your mind, too, in
yeah,
your body, too. In
yeah,
your body, too,
yeah.
Thiago.
It's a wild experience. And then the longing comes. That's certainly something I've experienced, right? I long, wow, I can go sit for 8 hours. Please, let me let me go do that.
Indeed. But then the longing also can get sidetracked into, wow, I'm having a really good session
I
this
know,
time,
I know.
right?
Because you will
Because
have a
because ego will use anything in order to keep itself going.
going. Yeah, and it will fade. I've had
Yes,
that
it will
personal
fade.
experience. Say, "Oh, I'm having great. This is great. This is amazing." And it's like, wait a minute, it's not that
It's-
amazing anymore. Where was that? And it's
Right.
like, oh
And you
man,
try to
recreate
recreate
it,
it.
and it's
Cannot.
like, oh, that's gone. Oh, it's gone. Oh, was that just a trip? Oh,
Yes, that
like
was
there's
just
the whole
that was just more thinking.
more and more, and it's like, wow, but that felt really real. I thought I was there.
That's it.
No.
That's it. The decisive moment is so pure,
Yeah.
pure and so naked, and it's so Teflon.
Sticky. Yeah.
Nothing sticks to it.
Yeah. Right.
Nothing sticks.
You want that. You keep
You
trying. Yeah.
want. Oh, it's like you go. Oh, so this is the heart of meditation. Okay, how am I going to keep repeating this?
Yeah.
My teacher used to say, you want to attend your own funeral. We all want to attend our own funeral. We cannot attend our own funeral. So yes, you could almost say the decisive moment in the breeze of delight is that moment when ego dies again. And then we want to have a big ceremony
Yeah.
where we congratulate ourselves
So
for having died.
let's not go there yet.
Okay.
In this conversation, and I do want to circle back on the very beginning, on the first problem of effort, getting to the cushion. And the first problem, you say something here, in regards to getting to the cushion and the resistance to going there. It is a moment of truth, like the saying, if not now, when? If not there, where? If not me, who? I mean, there's really no 10 ways, 2 ways, 3 ways about this.
There's no way to rationalize it.
We can't talk around this or read around it or watch the
We have to do it.
there's no, it's only somehow find a way.
You put your ass on the cushion. Without that, nothing can happen. Without that, it's menus forever. It's not food.
Which goes into
laziness.
Which
right?
goes into laziness. And so let's talk about overcoming. And I mean, you talked about the 3 kinds of laziness
and
here.
I don't want to just completely recapitulate it. People can read about it.
Okay.
But I think the underlying point about laziness is that we talk ourselves into our resistance being real.
There you go.
And having talked ourselves into our resistance being real, then we then talk ourselves ultimately into being, well, I'm just a person who can't do this. There are others who can do it.
Right.
I know a couple of my friends, they're doing it. They just, I don't know, they're just better meditators than I am. They just figured out a way to do it. I can't do it. I'm the guy who can't do it. And we take almost a kind of, almost a pride in being the one who can't do it. And once we've talked ourselves into that, well, the Tibetans call that the king of all the obstacles. There are many obstacles, and we get into this later in the book. There are many obstacles that come up in the practice of meditation that we can learn about, experience, and cut through. But if we don't go to the cushion, we can't even deal with the obstacles. And if we don't deal with the other obstacles, then we can't progress. So this is where the right effort in the beginning of having to step over your resistance is crucial. If we don't step over the resistance and we don't actually do it, nothing will ever happen.
When I did my meditation instructor training, there was even a way of framing this in the beginning of if there's so much resistance, to sitting, go in the room and look at the cushion, and then go step near it, then just sit on it, even if you can't.
That's lovely.
You know, sort of almost like behavioral level interventions.
Exactly.
It's like, I can't.
Almost Pavlovian.
Yeah, like, you know, just go look at it, and then
Yeah, right. You don't have to go sit on it. You don't have to meditate. Just open the door of the room.
open the door and look.
There's your cushion. You could maybe get there.
You could maybe get there. You know,
it. I love
that there's all these levels of this, and I think maybe to your point that people can read this, but the second like type of laziness, I really think is one that sometimes clinically it's shown up where I'm having a conversation with
So
folks.
why don't you name that and say a little bit about it?
Well, the laziness of doing too much.
Right. Too many activities.
You know, having too many activities.
Having too many activities.
You know, I'm too busy. And more often than not, especially nowadays in our world, I often thought I'm gonna butcher the way that it's framed, but you know, if you're too busy, it comes from Zen, I think, and you'll correct me here, but if you're too busy, sit for 20 minutes. If you have absolutely no time, sit for an hour.
It's good.
Right? And
Yes.
it's just like, no, stop. Cut through all that.
Right.
No.
Right. It's just a story.
You know, it's like, there's time.
Yes.
There's time.
There's definitely time.
There's time.
Yeah, and I actually don't know whether this is in the chapter anywhere, but another experience that is commonly acknowledged and that I have experienced is that the more you sit, the more time you have. And I don't mean just for sitting. What I mean is that the more you sit, the more you realize that this notion of being overwhelmed by how many activities you have is mostly the result of your mental speed. So that you're just, it's not even that, you know, it's not even that it takes all that much time to do these activities, but it takes a hell of a lot of time to think about how many activities you have to do. And when you sit, because you're dealing with the speed of that mind that is constantly generating stories about how much I have to do, how little time, you find that you suddenly have much more time than you ever imagined. In other words, the whole thing is just a con. You're just conning yourself. We have to see.
And a very sophisticated one.
It's very sophisticated. But we have to see that all the obstacles to actually walking on this path are self-created. And because we're creating them, we can overcome them.
And there's something here about strengthening the mind. I mean, ultimately, I think it goes to liberation and confidence and awareness. But it's almost like the nature of human intelligence is what we're discussing here, that, you know, conceptualization, rationalizations, really maybe conceptuality is really the correct way to frame it, is that we become over-identified with conceptualizations, and we think we are the conceptualizations.
Very much so.
And that's a psychological process where, I mean, my God, a lot of human confusion is just right there on that level. We put the flag on of the conceptualization we're identifying with. Ideology is that.
That's very true. But I would make a distinction between logical mind, which particularly in the West has been used to create all kinds of institutions and arts and sciences and ways of dealing with the world in a logical and rational way. And then the conceptualization, which reinforces stories that we have about ourselves, that keep us from doing things that will promote our health and that will help us to become free.
Yeah, the empirical method appears to stand alone, right?
We could call it the scientific method.
Yeah.
And actually, meditation in its own way is a science of mind.
Yes.
You know.
Yes.
So just as the West has sort of taken the science of observing the phenomenal world to the incredible degrees of subtlety and effectiveness and precision, the Buddha and all of the teachings that have come since have turned that lens back onto the observer, onto the experiencer. and applied the scientific method, the empirical method of try this out. The Buddha never said, accept what I'm saying on blind faith. He said, try it. Try it. It worked for me. See if it works for you. If it works for you, do it. If it doesn't,
Yeah, that's
go
absolutely
somewhere else.
scientific. Of course.
It's
yeah.
very scientific.
Yeah.
And so the science there is that it cuts through the false stories that we have made up in order to not do what we need to do in order to be free. So I wanted to make that distinction for what it's worth.
It's almost the Buddha was attempting sort of falsification there. It's like, try to falsify it. See if it works for you. See
That's
if it
good.
doesn't. I mean,
That's good. Try to negate it.
negate it. Go.
And that's how science works.
That is. I mean, disprove it.
Yeah.
Disprove it. This can't be the thing. It can't be that.
Yeah, you disprove this and give me a better model.
That's right.
So, yeah, the West has done that with the science of phenomena. The Buddha did it with the science of the observer, the experiencer. Meditation is very scientific.
Right.
That needs to be said.
So.
That needs to be said. And one of the reasons it needs to be said is because meditation had no real validity in our culture until neuroscience began to do experiments that proved that, oh yeah, these guys are onto something. Until Western people were told by the scientists who did the experiments in the labs that, oh yeah, this stuff actually seems to be doing what it says it's doing. Everybody just thought it was witchcraft. Love and light bullshit. So I wanted to say that.
Yeah.
It needs to be said.
Yeah. And
It's a very old science.
it's a very old science.
Of mind, life, the deepest human questions about suffering. The Buddha, he looked at it scientifically and he made very, very profound observations. And as far as I can tell, no one has disproved them yet.
That's right.
And that's an important point.
No, people apparently keep discovering that there's something to the discovering of the watcher, the discovering that conceptualizations are fraught with suffering and that you don't have to identify with them.
Exactly.
I mean, people sort of, it helps people.
It's helpful. And that's all he cared about. He said, I'm not here to debate with you the existence of God.
That's right.
I'm here to tell you, you seem to be suffering, and I was too, and this is what I did, and it worked for me. Try it and see.
Which is a totally different attitude altogether. Then I have the right God, the right religion, the right whatever.
Completely. It's a totally different.
Very good.
And almost all, well, just to take it one step further.
Yeah.
Almost all religions are spiritual traditions which posit the existence of God depend upon books, a tradition of books to assert their view.
Yeah.
Ultimately, as we said before, the books are just the first stage of how the Buddha taught. He said, read the books, familiarize yourself with the tradition, with what many other very intelligent people have discovered, and then sit down and see for yourself.
Right.
Sit down and see for yourself.
There's something very congruent about that attitude, very organic.
Completely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if it's so generalizable, well, then let's generalize the experience.
Let's generalize the experience. Exactly.
So let's, I just want to just dovetail at the end here again
Sure.
with the breeze of delight.
Sure.
I'm just going to read this paragraph, which I think is really powerful. Wakefulness, which is what we're talking about, is an experience of unconditional goodness. More and more as you practice meditation, you begin to recognize this experience and to appreciate its incomparable value. Accessing it may be as simple as seeing a golden patch of sunlight on the wall of your bedroom when you wake up in the morning. Right? It's not these fireworks. It's not this sort of whatever fantasy of materialism we might have about the nature of enlightenment. It's something else.
My teacher said it's extraordinarily ordinary. I think he used the word extraordinary to say that the ordinariness we have been we've been speeding past the ordinariness forever. And when we actually stop and really get that this is it, this is all there is, that patch of sunlight when I wake up in the morning, then it becomes extraordinary. Is it ultimately extraordinary? No, that's just almost the drama of the experience of waking up kind of adds an extra poignancy. It's almost as if, whoa, how could I have missed this all along?
Right. Right.
But it's the simplicity of it.
Right.
It's the simplicity of our life. It's moment to moment. It's all we have. We experience it first in the body, and then the mind does what it will do with it. But meditation is about corralling the tendency of the mind to keep trying to make something out of nothing.